everyone, welcome back to my channel. You're watching The Brown Feminist. In today's episode, I will be telling you how you can write a proper resume for a role as a clinical research assistant if you are a fresh graduate or a beginner in the industry. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, when you're a fresh grad or you're somebody who's very new to the industry, it can be really challenging to know how to really write a resume where you don't necessarily have a lot of relevant skills and experiences. So in this video, I will be focusing on how you can show skills that are relatable or translatable to this industry. Skills in customer service, skills in volunteering at hospitals, skills in the lab, and other skills you might have from your academic education, your undergrad degree in a different subject, and how you can show through your resume that you do have the necessary skills and some of the experiences to give you at least a shot as a clinical research assistant. So I'm going to flip over and show you exactly what we're going to type in for today's video, how we're going to build the resume step by step together, and how in each scenario you can think of a skill or an experience you have outside the industry, or you have done it in an undergrad, or you've done it in a diploma, and how you can actually decorate that within your resume to demonstrate that you do have the skills they're looking for in a particular job. So the step one is to start by looking at the jobs you're looking at and what kind of skills they are looking for. So let's get started. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what skills and qualities a certain job requires. And for that, we're going to go to a job site. So my most common search job site is Indeed. So I'll just go to indeed.ca. You can go to another one. You can go to like LinkedIn or whatever you want and say, okay, so I'm based in Ottawa, and let's say clinical research assistant. You can also search for clinical trial assistant or research assistant. So this one's level 3, so we're not going to go with that one. Level 2, more admin, coordinator. Where are the assistant jobs, you guys? Okay, so that was funny. I actually had to change my city because there were no jobs for clinical research assistants in Ottawa. How embarrassing. So I've changed it to Montreal now and search for clinical research assistants. You can see a couple right here. We can see research assistant at the Jewish General Hospital. We can see a clinical trial assistant at NeuroRx. So there's quite a few. Let's go for this one. So this one is at McGill. And okay, so let's take a look at the job description. So the first thing we want to do is we've looked at the title, we've kind of looked at where it is and what the role entails. And now we're going to just go through and quickly read the job description. This video is not really about the institutes in particular, but a very general understanding of what you need to look for before you start designing your resume. So for example, there's an educational requirement. So it says you need to have a bachelor's degree at a minimum, and it's preferred that you have a master's or a PhD, but it's not essential. And then you need a background and experience in psychology. That's preferred. So anytime it's preferred, it's not mandatory. So that's okay. We can still apply to the job. And clinical research experience involving children or adolescents. So this is an interesting one. So even if you don't have research experience, but you do have work experience involving children or adolescents or the youth population in a summer camp or something, we can still use that in the resume. Good interpersonal skills and knowledge of research methodology, must be able to work autonomously. So these are more like soft skills. Spoken English and French is necessary. So these are the decisions you need to take. If you do speak French, that's awesome. If you are English French bilingual, if you're not, and this skill is necessary, then this job would not be for you. But for the sake of just designing our resume today, we're going to progress with this, even though I myself do not speak French. Blah, blah, blah. So, okay, we have a pretty good understanding of the educational requirements. And then In terms of general duties, you can screen through it and see what else they're really looking for. Somebody who understands ADHD. So basically any exposure you have with mental health, any university you've done, courses you've done on mental health, those would be beneficial. Data summaries and data entries and questionnaires. So this is something you've usually done for one of your other courses. I once had to do that, a survey-based questionnaire thing on campus for an English class project. So I can write about that. Conduct telephone screenings and patient follow-ups. So here, if you don't have direct patient contact experience, using other kinds of customer service experience that you might have from retail can also be very helpful. And then conduct diagnostic interviews, facilitate group interventions, and other stuff like that. Okay, so this was pretty standard. We can look at one more and then we'll jump back and then start building our resume. There's one here, pretty sure most of them are gonna require French because it is based in Montreal. I can't actually read it because it's written in French. This looks interesting. To clinical research assistant, Department of Thoracic Surgery. So what are your requirements? Okay, establish and maintain a database tracking patient visits, blah, blah, blah. So patients are gonna come at like routine follow-ups for the clinical study. You're gonna have to maintain like what happens at each follow-up and the data collection for each follow-up and update that information in a database. Recruit patients to the central biobank for lung and gastric cancer clinical trials. So that's very difficult because you're working with like a population which has been diagnosed with cancer. So they're obviously like going through a difficult time, but a lot of them do want the opportunity to be in a clinical trial and to help other people through their condition as well. So it's very sensitive, but you should be able to like recruit patients like that. If you have like a nursing background, it's excellent to write that you've worked with like sick populations. If you've volunteered in a hospital, you've volunteered in a cancer center, it's really important to say that you know how to navigate the sensitive environment and kind of work with patients in such a setting. So coordinate study visits as per study protocol, blah, blah, blah. This is coordination, venipuncture. So this role, as you can see, unlike the last one, is looking a lot more at clinical skills and nursing skills, like dealing with cancer patients and like actually like drawing blood or like, you know, giving medication, things like that. So I think they would definitely prefer someone with clinical training. Yeah, perform clinical evaluation of the trial participants, data collection and questionnaires, study documentation, data entry, data analysis, and so on. They need a master's degree in something like clinical epi or data science. It seems like this is pretty solid for them and they do need a more advanced candidate. So even though the titles were same, this is not the kind of role I would necessarily recommend for you unless you come from a nursing clinical background or you have a master's in clinical epi. I wouldn't recommend for like applying to a job like this for your first one. So we will go back and kind of base our like resume off of like the other ones that we've seen, but pretty much a lot of the things will be common, like data collection, data analysis, data entry, things like that. You'll hear words like trial master file and stuff. Okay, so we've gotten an idea of what we kind of need to do. And we'll just go over to the other screen and start building our resume. Okay, so I've just opened up Microsoft Word, my favorite software to be building a resume on. You can obviously use like Word docs or whatever else you'd like. There are many designs to do a resume, but I'll just go with the one that I'm most familiar with, and honestly, it doesn't matter. As long as you are highlighting the things you should be highlighting, it's not unnecessarily long or it's not so short that you're missing out on information, it's a good resume. Recruiters don't care like how flashy your resume is, what colors you've used, what's in bold and what's not. But you do want to focus on this is my highlight and then these are my subpoints. So of course, we're gonna go ahead by writing the full name. So for the sake of this video, I will be first name Brown, last name Feminist. Try to use a consistent font for your whole resume. You can use like Arial or Times New Roman. I think I'll use Arial for this video. No, I'll use Times New Roman for this video. And all headings, you can do a certain size. Like all my headings except for the name are usually at 14, and then all my text is at 12. For our industry in clinical research, it's not necessary that you have to do a one-pager. That's more of a corporate thing, I feel. It's more of a tech thing, maybe. But in our field, you can definitely have longer than one page, but it shouldn't be like 5 pages. A standard 2-page resume, max 3 pages, but for an entry level, I would say no more than 1 to 2 pages. That should be more than sufficient to highlight all of your things. Okay, so the second thing you want to give, and this is a byline, so we're at 12 font size, is going to be your email. So let's do LeBronFeminist90@gmail.com. And then you want your phone. You want to have everything accurate. You want to have an email that correctly demonstrates your name. Your email should not say, I don't know, like I love poutine@gmail.com. No, if you're writing a resume for the first time, you're new to the industry, it should say first name dot last name, or first name, last name, and a few numbers or some underscores at whatever domain you have. You try to use always the same kind of email so that you know all of your professional emails or recruiter emails are going to like one inbox. If you're using your personal one, stick to it. If you're using your school's one, stick to it. Try not to use a temporary work email, because if you leave your job there, employers might reach out to you there and you might no longer have access to it. So phone number, let's say country code or whatever, and then city code, say 914-123-4645. So I'm just making that up. And then I provide my address. So a lot of people say you don't need the address, but a lot of the times employers have preferences based on where you live. If you are a local versus they're hiring out of city or out of state, because there is like moving costs and stuff. So they feel like for an entry level, especially for any kind of part-time casual, you're usually not going to be considered if you're out of the city. For full-time entry levels, I've seen a bigger preference be given to people who are local. Only when they're kind of not getting their skills in the local talent pool and they have somebody very well experienced outside the city, and that person's like really eager to move, that's when they usually look outside the city. So for example, say I'm in Montreal right now, so I will say 3345, say Avenue Dupois, Montreal, Quebec, also all like made up addresses, sorry guys. And then like a postal code. So I don't know, like H3, K1C, 1B4. Awesome. So very standard formatting. This is like very general. And the reason I'm showing it is because we are doing a very entry level resume thing. So I'm just reducing the number of line spaces between these two, because your name is the highlight and the information below is, it has to be there, but it's not a highlight. They're not going to give you the job based of it. But if they want to look at it, they want to connect with you, it just needs to be there. So that's it. The entry personal level of our resume is like done. That's it. The next section, I have seen people do one of two things. I've seen people who do career highlights. For an entry level, there's not too much highlights that you have to give. It's not like you have 5+ years of experience managing multi-site clinical trials and 3+ years in a management role. Like you don't have that yet. So instead, we can do a career profile. And in this, you can write 1 to 2 sentences about what you are looking for, what your short-term goal is, what your long-term goal is, what you have to offer. And then you can just do a very short summary. So I'm a little bit more experienced, but I'm just going to go back to like when I had just finished like my schooling and I was looking for clinical research jobs, but I did not have the kind of experience I have now. So I will put myself in the shoes of me 4 years ago or 5 years ago. Recent master's graduate in immunology, seeking to specialize in clinical trial management or clinical research, right? So it can be something as simple as that. Alternately, let's look at something else. Suppose you don't have your degree in a subject that is in science. Then you don't want to highlight it in your career profile. You want to highlight the things that are similar and kind of avoid or just hide or just like not really highlight the parts that are not super relevant. So let's say recent university graduate with, say you have a lot of customer service experience with 2+ years of experience in client-facing roles, eager to build a career in clinical research, right? Or let's say recent university graduate with 4+ years in a clinic environment or in a hospital environment. And that might mean that you worked within a hospital setting, maybe part-time, maybe volunteering, but you don't have necessarily a clinical background or education, right? Or with 3+ years, or like with, and when we're saying 3+, 4+ years, you can count the summer jobs that you have had over the 4 years of university. So research university graduate with extensive research experience in psychology. Say you have a bachelor's of psychology and each summer you did like a co-op or an internship in the field. You can write that in psychology, looking to specialize in a clinical trial role. As simple as that. So I'm going to go back to what I had because then it will kind of make sense. So let's say recent master's graduate in immunology with extensive research experience in a laboratory setting, looking to transition to clinical trial research. I can also add like extensive research experience in a lab setting and patient-facing customer service experience. Looking to transition to clinical trial research, so something like that. It just has to show who you are as a person, what you're looking for, what this job means to you, why you're doing it. So a very quick, simple kind of glimpse for that. Okay, so whatever you write in the career profile is up to you. Have a few people look it over. We're going to go to the next part. A lot of people would put in education. And yes, if you are doing this as your first job, you don't have a whole lot of things to put in it. You can put in education. I don't. So the pros and cons of this is if your education is relevant to the job, put your education up there. If your education is like in something completely different, like a different branch of social sciences, history, something else, which doesn't really say science or research or something like that, then you might benefit from not having your education right up there. It's the second thing they see. For me, it was a bachelor's of science and a master's of science. So I will list my education, something like very short, one line, not like my GPA was this, my major was that, my minor, not all that's not necessary. I'm just going to say BSc in biochemistry, say Northeastern University. And then you can say the country. So say this was in, let's say India. I didn't go to India, but let's just say India for the sake of this, in 2014. And then so the most recent has to go on top. So MSc in immunology, say McGill University, Canada in 2016. So of course, these are not accurate about my life, but I'm just giving you a glimpse of like some of the degrees I've done by changing your university names. So that's your education. If they're relevant, you can keep them up top, because one of the job requirements we looked at the beginning of this video, they were looking for someone with a master's degree in something clinical. The other one said you needed to have a bachelor's at a minimum, and then the master's is preferred. So having those two is a tick. If I had them, but they were not really relevant to research, I had them in a very course-based, non-research kind of degree in business school or something, I would not be putting it in here. I would be moving the education one down to a different section, maybe at the end of the page or in the next page. Now you can write about work experience. Once again, if you're choosing to write of what to put on the first page and you're choosing between work experience and volunteering experience, make that decision based on which one has more relevant things in for the position. If your volunteer experience is like this is something that I personally did because I was a patient ambassador in the cancer center at the Ottawa Hospital Cancer Center, right? And I did that from 2014 to 2016. That's very relevant. So if at this time, if you have both sections, work experience and volunteer experience being relevant, then you can obviously, you should put work experience up there. For example, if my work experience in comparison to this is that I have worked as a summer research assistant, and I have worked at a lab, say a cell biology research institute, Ottawa, for one summer. So that would be, say, in 2015, no, in 2013, during undergrad. So between the two, you need to learn which one to prioritize. So in this case, if you just have one of each, it's fine. It doesn't matter which one you're putting up there. But if you have like a whole lot of work experience and they are more relevant, you want to put them on the first page. And these are important because when a recruiter opens it, they will not go through every single line of your CV with the same amount of attention unless they're in the very beginning, they're hitting on things which are relevant. They're like, oh, master's graduate, good. Oh, it's a science degree. Oh, work experience, summer research. Okay, I will read the rest of this resume. Okay, now suppose you didn't have any work experience in the field and you were customer service associate at Walmart, for example, from 2010 to 2014, and then you went to school. So in that case, I would actually put the volunteering one, which is a little bit more relevant, up here. I would put any other volunteering as well. For example, HIV clinic, downtown Ottawa, and your role was like patient support volunteer. And you did that from 2016 to 2018. That's relevant, right? What else can be relevant based on the fact that you've just done a degree and you don't have a whole lot of work experience? Of course. So because one of the roles we were looking at, it was a clinical research assistant for an ADHD program. So they might be looking for someone who has understanding of mental health. So maybe you've done mental health pathology for an undergrad course, and whatever, HP 3400, and then you say like where you did it and when you did it, right? So usually courses don't hold a lot of value, but we're talking about like, okay, you have nothing else to put on there and this is your very first job. In that case, I would put the course on there. I would still put the course though after volunteering and work, because nothing beats volunteering hands-on experience and work hands-on experience. Courses will never overtake that in a resume. So let's say I have that. I have this. What else do we put on a resume? Let's say we have one or two other job experiences. For example, remember one of the things we saw on Indeed was that they are looking for people who have experience working with children. So maybe you have worked at a summer camp and that was a paid position. So that is a work experience. Summer camp counselor, right? And that would be, say, 2015. I was a summer camp counselor during grad school. Or you have done other things. So suppose you have volunteered as a in the Big Brother or Big Sister program. So that's usually like a mentorship program in Canada. It might be called something else in a different country, but volunteer in the maybe youth mentorship program, let's say the YMCA. Right? That is relevant because you have experience managing underage children children who can have various conditions, children who might have anxiety or depression, or they might have conflicts between themselves. They might have a hard time expressing themselves, and you have that valuable experience. So let's say 2018 to 2019, that's what you did. You were volunteering. So yeah, you have all of this stuff here. Now let's look at software skills. This is very important because in a lot of places that the jobs we were looking at, we saw that they're looking for people who can do data entry and people who can do like data management. So you will list all the software skills and what level of experience you have in them. So for example, let's start with the very beginning. Even if you don't have software experience, these ones you must. For example, MS Word. Of course you do, for sure. Everybody does. Let's say you have advanced understanding of it, MS Excel. Now this depends if you've done a lot of Excel in undergrad or not, if you've done some statistical analysis or not. So let's say you are intermediate. Let's say you have Microsoft PowerPoint. I'm sure you've made like a bunch of like presentations and stuff for school and other things or co-ops. So let's put in MS PowerPoint. You know how to put in music and videos and text and slideshows and like moving things around and changing font and doing presentations. Maybe Access, maybe not. Maybe you know some programming languages. Maybe you know SQL. Maybe you've used a software such as SPSS. If not, that's okay. And then you can say like what level you are at for each. I'm just like not writing them, but like you get what I mean. Some of them have asked for things like other analytical skills. So you can merge them as well. So for example, one of the positions asked if you have experience doing surveys. So let's say we're writing that you have done used Lime Survey, or you have used SurveyMonkey. So when you're using them, you are obviously demonstrating that you are comfortable using software to collect data, qualitative research data in a survey format from patients. There, you've shown it, things like that. So then when you come back, you can think of elaborating on your work experiences, right? For example, we were just talking about Lime Survey and SurveyMonkey. So if you go back and in Walmart, when you were dealing with customer service, collected feedback from customers through routine surveys there, right? Then mentored and supported children with hyperactivity disorders, or maybe you didn't, or maybe it's something more fun, maybe like managed up to 15 children through interactive projects, team building exercises, and conflict resolution strategies. So you've usually done all of that at summer camp. Or for example, if you want to break down a little bit more about your volunteer role, then you can say mentored children and adolescents. Adolescents are like kind of like teens, we're not yet adults, through peer counseling. So you've talked to them, calmed them down, helped them with counseling as a peer, not as a professional. Academic guidance, group activities, supported children with mental health conditions or special needs. There, so you've already started to demonstrate that you can work with a population which is not the regular population, which is like special needs. So for example, in the cancer center, routinely interacted with and supported patients recently diagnosed with cancer, right? Provided information regarding restrooms or like activities or counseling services that are offered by the hospital, wig salon, snack counters, provided brochures on symptom management. So all of this stuff I did just as a hospital volunteer, and you can write all of this on your resume. So obviously don't have spelling mistakes, but you kind of get the gist of it. So this is what your standard resume will look like. And if you are new, then it shouldn't take more than a page, maximum two. When you have a lot more to write, you can write a lot more. But over here, you've already started to demonstrate like how each of your roles are actually helping to meet back with the job. And that's why I really support the idea of having like a slightly customized resume for each job that you apply to. Even under your course that you had written, you could, for example, write about like you've had detailed experience of detailed understanding. This is not experience, it's a course. So it's understanding and knowledge of medical terminology in the context of, say, mental health pathologies, right? Because we are trying to apply for a job where they want to know that you understand the difference between ADD and ADHD and like different kinds of depression, like chronic depression, clinical manic depression, and all of that. So you want to demonstrate that you've taken courses in mental health or you've taken courses in psychology and you understand that. You understand the differences, right? Understanding of ADHD, symptoms, mechanisms, treatment options, management strategies, and more. So this is an example of what you could do, assuming that the role was ADHD focused. Suppose it wasn't, we could have written things like how you volunteered maybe in a blood drive, how you volunteered in like the cardiac unit of a hospital or the children's hospital, and you played with children. So there are many ways to demonstrate the skills you're looking for through your resume, as long as it's applying back to the job. Suppose here you've worked with a lot of people who are I don't know, like maybe people who are injection drug users. That is another health population, but that's not very relevant to this position. So you can still have it on there, but in that case, don't elaborate so much on it. Elaborate on the ones which are most relevant to your current role. And for the rest of them, just list it. For example, you have volunteer experience in to work as a field volunteer for the homeless shelter run by the Salvation Army, say in Ottawa. And you've done that since 2019 and 2020. Now this one, they're looking for people who will work with children with ADHD in this clinical role. So elaborating on this is not super important for this resume, for this job. But if you're working for a different clinical research assistant role, maybe one where they're working with a lot of drug users or people who have alcohol dependencies or people who have low socioeconomic background and Hep C or HIV or common conditions that they might carry, common infections they might carry, in that case, it'll be more important to expand on this one as opposed to the cancer center or as opposed to the YMCA, right? So you have to kind of like decide which one you want to expand on and which one not to. Or if you want to keep it more consistent looking, you can, but then you can keep it like one sentence, like very short, because that's not relevant to your position. However, it does kind of show that you have a lot of experience working with various kinds of people and patients. So there we go. That's basically all you require in a resume to get an interview call in a job. You can list your references, and references have to be professional. So they have to be either from work or from school, ideally one of each. If you have a professor in your third year, fourth year, or somebody you've done summer RA ships with, and they can give you a reference, that's pretty solid. Or you have done customer service work and you have a manager there. So one or two good references, one professional, one academic, is very strong. Or you can also just write references available upon request. If you don't feel like listing it in your resume, that's okay too. Usually when you've interviewed for a position and it's gone pretty far, the last thing they'll do is look for your references. But they might tell you in advance, like, hey, keep 3 references ready. Other things that might be required, you don't always have to list on your resume. Sometimes certifications. Actually, no, certifications are pretty important. You should definitely list them before your references. What kind of certifications can you think of that would be relevant? For example, clinical research, right? So first aid, CPRC, first is, what is it? What is the one that the swimming team does? Anyway, first aid, CPR, and AED. You can have other ones, like for example, aware. You can have assist, which is like a suicide prevention one. You can have non-violent crisis intervention. These are not necessary. You don't have to go out of your way to pay money and do them, except the first one is like very important. I would say everybody should do the first one. It's pretty important. But other than that, if you've just happened to do them because of school or because of some course or because of something else, like go ahead and put them in, right? Why not? So obviously you shouldn't write it like this. You should be writing out the full thing. So for example, I think this one is non-violent crisis intervention. And then you would name the organization that issues the certificate. So I think this was Living Works. And then what year you did it in, right? Because some of them expire, some of them don't. But even if it's expired, list it so they know you've done it once. So in that way, you can do a lot of them. If you've done anything in like a clinical research diploma or certificate course, wonderful. If not, don't worry about it. And then from where you did it, and then year that you did it in, or that you finished it in. Similarly here, this would be, say, Red Cross Canada that I did it in, and then maybe I did it in the year 2018. And so on, so forth. So then after certification, some people like to write other skills, or other skills, and you can list things like your driving license, because some positions do actually require it if there is travel to and from different clinical sites, but most of them don't. It's really up to you, but if you have a full G, no harm writing it, since you're in the beginning of your career. You don't have a whole bunch of things to write there, right? You can also say things like what your status is, because in Canada, they want to know you're either like a PR or you're on a open work permit, so they know that there won't be an issue later, things like that. You can list. I don't, but you can if you want to. If your resume you feel is like short or something like that, these are some of the things that you could be listing. So there are other skills as well that you could list. For example, if you have clinical skills, so they wouldn't fall under software skills, but if you have any experience doing like blood draws from patients or assessments, taking blood pressures and things like that. So it would depend on the role. If you see in the job ad that they're looking for a lot of like clinical training, you can have a separate section that says clinical skills and then list whatever it is that you have experience in doing, taking temperatures, doing blood pressures, heart rate and oxygen, taking weight and height, or like collecting information from patients, things like that. If you don't have them, don't worry. This is like a very entry-level resume that we're building today, and eventually you will get there. Other things that you could do, for example, would be like if you have any publications, you could list them, like manuscripts. If you have done like presentations, done like an oral presentation given on like a research day, a conference you've been to, a poster presentation you've done, all of that is relevant, but I would put them on the second page, or I would put them at the end. They're not super highly looked out for by a hiring manager for a clinical research role. And then, yeah, so that's basically it. If you want, if you have done placements for a school, if you've done co-op, definitely list all of that. Whatever jobs you've held, they would all go under work experience, relevant coursework, software skills, and volunteering experience. And that's essentially what you need in order to apply. So there you go. You have your resume. It's obviously not very well done because I haven't like really finished them, but basically beginner, intermediate, and advanced, like you can say that you've started learning it. One other thing that a lot of positions do look for is a language skill. So you can say under other skills like languages that you speak. Now, if you only speak English, you don't have to list it. But if you speak like 4 or 5 languages, if you speak English, French, Arabic, Hindi, Bangla, Urdu, whatever, Spanish, list them. There is no harm to it. And a lot of positions actually look for people who are multilingual because they work with like those specific populations. So make sure your resume is obviously like, this is not a general resume tutorial. It's more like based for a clinical trial. So I'm not really going to tell you like how to make this bold and how not to. But in general, I think you get an idea. As long as it is clean, there are clean lines, clean bullet points. All of my bullet points are aligned. All of my headings are bulleted. So here, one thing looks really bad. This doesn't have a semicolon and this does. So you want to be consistent throughout. So I've used a semicolon everywhere. So I just want to be like consistent and make sure it's like visually very well done. So I will put a colon here. And yeah, anything general, you can center a line. You want to have like enough space between the different sections, unless you're like trying to fit everything within the same section. And yeah, that's about it. So use tabs, don't use space bars. And try to use full forms of things like, I think this is like standard query language or something like that. SPSS, IBM, and Lime Survey, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, you have listed all of your software skills. So that's it of how to build your resume. You have your name, you have your email, phone, address. If you want, some people also put in like their LinkedIn website. So make sure your LinkedIn is like up to date. And then like you put in like, I obviously don't have a LinkedIn for Brown Feminist, but I'm just saying you can, that's something you can definitely do. And they might go and take a look at it. And yeah, so career profile, education, and then you can do work before or you can do volunteering, depend on which of these two sections has the most relevant skills with your position. But typically work goes first. It's much more common for work to actually go first. And then you have coursework, anything that's relevant to the position, software skills, certifications, other skills, languages, and things like that, and references. And 1.5 is fine. You don't have to make a resume 2-page just by force if you don't have the materials for it. And you don't have to like kill yourself trying to like make this smaller. We could if we wanted to. There are strategies if you don't want to say advanced skill, and then you can just put them all on like one line, and that could necessarily help you save a lot more space, if that makes any sense. But all of these are like little visual things that you're doing. They're not necessary, and I really think you can still get a job even if you had it designed a different way. It usually doesn't make a big difference. So that was it for this section. I hope it's been helpful, and I hope you can kind of figure out how to do it on your own. Please let me know in the comments down below if there are any other specific questions that you have. If you need to know like, hey, I've done all of this like lab work, how can I like bring in some of my experiences from there? Questions like that, I would be happy to answer in a follow-up video. But in general, if you've done something like worked as a summer research assistant, like definitely build those in. For example, if you've worked as a summer research assistant and you've worked for McGill University, you worked for 2018, and then during that time, you've actually done a lot of experiments in the lab, but that's not what you want to focus on. You want to write about how you did collection or handling of biological specimen, storing, running tissue culture experiments, shipment of samples. So those things are obviously like very relevant here. So there's an infinite number of ways that you can bring in skills and abilities and education from various fields and put them on a resume to cater that towards clinical research. So I hope this gives you like a very general understanding. If you're coming from social science, clinical world, or like basic science research, this is what you would do. You would not list a million equipment that you learned how to use in the lab. You would not be like, I know how to centrifuge, or I know how to do an ELISA, or I know how to do flow cytometry, because that wouldn't be relevant. But you should put in the title, the time, the experience, the reference, and you should write which aspect of that job is going to help you become a better clinical research assistant. That's all.
And that's it for today's video. I really hope you've enjoyed it and that it was useful to you. If you have any more questions or comments or suggestions actually to modify the resume writing process, please do let me know in the comments below. Also, I will be doing a separate video which is for more intermediate positions in clinical research such as associate and coordinators. This is something that I have done most recently. I've gotten interviews and positions as coordinators and associates. So the resume writing process is obviously a little bit different. And to check out that video, I'm going to link it down below. So don't forget to check that one out also. Until next time, this is the Brown Feminist. Bye.